The beauty and drama of the Australian coastline is truly awe-inspiring. Stretching over 30,000 kilometres, it wraps endlessly around desert, rainforest and cities. Countless towering cliffs and rocky headlands connect over 10,000 beaches and bays. Some wild and untouched, others world famous and teeming with life. But the Australian coastline is famous for something else. In this episode of Savage Australia, you'll witness the most terrifying shark attacks in Australia's history.
I knew at that point that I was getting attacked by a shark.
Life-changing moments.
I just saw this row of teeth.
And horrific brushes with death.
This eye was right there in front of me.
Heroic rescues.
We're in a boat at the moment, we're racing in, we just had a shark attack.
And those that didn't make it.
Pretty sure that he was on his own out swimming. His wife was on the beach at the time.
You'll see the danger.
These massive mako sharks come screaming up and push me out of the way and eating the marlin.
And the drama. Oh, yeah! Sharks on Savage Australia.
Could be any Australian beach, from Bondi to Broome, from Manly to Mooloolaba. From the moment a fin is sighted offshore, the reaction will be the same along 12,000 miles of coastline. Lone swimmers head for shore immediately the sound reaches them. The bell rings out a warning that their lives are in danger, that somewhere not far away is a shark which may be a man-eater, a killer.
The stark fact is, right now, Australia has the highest number of fatal shark attacks in the world, with Western Australia recently becoming the deadliest place on the globe for attacks. Since 1788, the total number of shark encounters stands at 1,264, with total fatalities at 272. However, since 1990, figures have shot up with 43 fatalities. So what's going on?
If we look at the shark attack statistics in Australia, there certainly seems to be an increase over the years. But I think a lot of people forget that population has increased dramatically. We're also becoming more and more wealthy, so there's more and more people enjoying their leisure time, spending longer days on the water, popularization of surfing as a sport. Those have all been contributing factors to potentially showing this increase in shark bites.
So where in Australia is the safest place to brave the waters? Strangely enough, it may well be the place with the biggest population, Sydney. Yet, over the years, it's certainly had its fair share of tragedy. New Year's Eve, 1934, was a black day for Sydney swimmers, with 2 attacks in the space of 3 hours. The Georges River in Sydney's south was the scene of the 2 horrific attacks. 19-year-old Richard Soden was racing mates across the river when suddenly he screamed and sank under the water. Dragging his mauled leg from the jaws of a shark, he swam to a sandbank where he died in his mate's arms. A few hours later, Beryl Moran was standing in the same river when she heard a splash and saw movement in the water. She called out as she realised it was a shark circling her. It grabbed her by the right arm, dragged her under the water and tossed her in the air. She tried to push the shark away and it grabbed her left hand too. Despite her horrific injuries, Beryl went on to live until the age of 92. She married, had children, changed nappies, cooked dinner, and rode a bike, all without hands. Marcia Hathaway was a popular actress, but in 1963, she became the victim of one of Sydney Harbour's most infamous attacks. Marcia was wading in pretty Sugarloaf Bay, enjoying a perfect afternoon with her fiancé as the killer inched ever closer. Suddenly, it pounced, sinking its massive jaws into Miss Hathaway's right leg. She screamed in agony as her fiancé wrestled the shark and tried to stop it dragging her to deeper water. It tore at her calf and thigh until the water was foaming blood red. Pulled from the water and bleeding heavily, Marcia Hathaway was lifted onto a waiting ambulance. The vehicle stalled as it attempted to drive up the steep hill leaving from the beach, and more than 20 people were unable to move it. Another ambulance was called, but Marcia Hathaway was pronounced dead on arrival in hospital. Marcia was the unlucky last person to be killed in the waters around Sydney. For almost 50 years, there was peace in the harbour, as swimmers and sharks happily coexisted. But it was never going to last. At age 31, Paul de Gelder had given more than a third of his life to the armed services. 5 years ago, he qualified as a clearance diver, one of the toughest jobs in the Navy. But nothing could prepare him for what happened here. In the shadow of the Sydney Opera House and just metres from the protections of the Australian Navy's firepower.
It was just over there, near the front of that ship.
It was February 11, 2009, when Paul met his fate.
There's sharks everywhere. You just put it to the back of your mind and try not to worry about it.
At around 6:30 in the morning, Paul and his team were testing anti-terrorism equipment in Sydney Harbour at the Navy Sydney headquarters. Paul was making his way across the surface of the water, and in an awful instant, his life changed.
I was swimming on my back. I had my fins on and a wetsuit on, and around I got hit in the leg and looked down and there was a big toothy grin.
This is the actual moment captured in this terrifying footage.
I just felt a huge whack in the leg. And then I looked down and just straight into the eyes of this massive shark's head. So I tried to jab it in the eyeball with my right hand, but I couldn't move it. And I looked down and I just saw this row of teeth all the way from the top of my knee, all across my thigh, all across my wrist. The lips were pulled back, and the shark just continued to shake me like a rag doll, just tearing the meat out of my leg and tearing my hand off my arm.
In one bite, the shark took his whole hand and the entire back of his leg.
And then all of a sudden I was free. It was the longest swim of my life. I didn't think I was going to make it out. I didn't think the guys were going to get to me in time. I thought another shark was going to come and grab me, or that the same shark was going to all of a sudden grab me by the ankle, and I was just mentally prepared for that to happen. But it never came.
For some reason, the shark had vanished and his Navy mates came charging to the rescue.
Over here, go, look!
The guys got to me in the boat and pulled me in, and out of sheer relief, I just passed out.
But by the time they got him back to the wharf, he'd lost a lot of blood.
He was in one of his less lucid moments. He was pale and white, eyes were closed, and at that time, I actually thought he was dead.
I think he came pretty close. He was lucky he did not have the major artery in his leg severed by the shark, and that was protected. I don't know how, but it was. But if that had occurred, I think he may have actually even died in the water.
The shark bite that happened at Woolloomooloo on the Navy diver was a very interesting scenario. There hasn't been a shark bite in Sydney Harbour for many, many decades before that. We are still not 100% sure of what the Navy were doing, but suffice to say that they were working with new technologies to be able to detect enemy frogmen, and it's very possible that potentially that attracted the bull shark into the area.
It wasn't long before Paul was on the road to recovery.
Well, when Degelda got attacked that year, we had tons of small tuna in the harbour. Tuna are #1 for sharks. They love them, and there were bull sharks everywhere. So that was probably the biggest year for sharks. From what I understand, he came to the surface and was splashing around, and yeah, he attracted some unwanted attention.
It's a fact that some of the wildest and craziest man-made shark moments happen on fishing trips.
I'm shaking just looking at this thing.
There's one thing with sharks, is it turns people mad. They get macho, throw in a bit of alcohol, and it's just a recipe for disaster.
But Josh Neal took things to extremes when he jumped into the water to try and wrangle this shark with a piece of rope.
If you try and jump in and wrangle it with a rope, you are seriously asking for trouble.
Unsurprisingly, when he tried to grab it by the tail, the shark did what sharks do.
And when you sort of judge an animal's ability, you think you can handle it. But obviously, on this occasion, it didn't work out that way.
Fishermen's tails may be tall, but Terry Selwood's tail was taller than most. The 73-year-old's fishing trip off Evans Head in northern New South Wales rudely interrupted when a 200-kilo great white suddenly leapt into his boat.
This thing hit me in the forearm and spun me round and knocked me off my feet, and I fell on the floor on my hands and knees, looked over and I thought, oh, a bloody shark.
Stunned, Terry was slashed as the shark thrashed about.
This was a cracker.
Marine Rescue responded to a call that surprised even them.
Retrieved him from the vessel, and because he had some injuries, we brought him straight back in, and then we went back out and recovered the vessel and towed that back in with the shark on board.
Talk about uninvited guests. I don't know how you plan for that or prevent it. That's the 1 in a million. That's the coconut landing on your head, that one.
North of Sydney lies the fishing mecca of Port Stephens. It was here that fishing magician Al McGlashan had a day he'll never forget.
So the wildest encounter I've had is we're up at Port Stephens and we were filming how to release marlin. So we fought this marlin, it was playing up all the way through the fight, you know, and we get it to the boat. Normally a marlin will just chill out and relax. This one just kept thrashing and kept sitting right beside the boat. I hadn't thought about that, I jumped straight in. And as I've sort of drifted away from the boat a little bit, all of a sudden these massive mako sharks come screaming up. And pushed me out of the way and eaten the marlin. First thing, I felt sorry for the poor old marlin because we're trying to let him go. And the second thing, I thought, holy moly, how do I get to the boat? And I'm like, I'm not going near the boat. I've got to climb over a great big shark to get in the boat, so I'm just going to stay. And I'm like shrinking in behind the camera going, I'll pretend to be small, you know. Came up and bit the marlin in the middle and then mouthed his way down to the tail. And then when he got the tail, he just put the teeth in and just snapped it off. And of course, by now the blokes in the boat finally have woken up to what's going on. And then I thought, you know what? I can't see the marlin. I'm surrounded by blood. I'm getting out of here. Those moments where you see nature in the raw like no other. So yeah, it was absolutely insane.
In 1964, on the southwestern coast of Victoria, Henry Borse was filming a documentary on sharks. While filming underwater at Lady Juliet Percy Island, Henry became surrounded by playful seals. All of a sudden, the seals vanished. Unsure of the reason for their sudden disappearance, Henry swam towards the surface. But before he reached the surface, a great white shark bit into his left leg.
Just out of nowhere, it hit like a train. He grabbed my leg, pulled me under and shook me from side to side. And he had me under for maybe something like a minute and a little more, and I was more concerned about drowning at that moment than I would have been about the leg. It was then that everything went quiet, and I realized I was free, and I fought my way to the surface for a breath of air. And on my way up, I felt around the leg and realized that the leg had been severed.
As his diving partners came to his rescue, Henry told the crew to keep filming.
There was one of the other divers there, and I grabbed his shoulder and said, shark, shark, you know, I've been attacked by a shark. And then realised that he wouldn't be able to see much because of the blood in the water. The shark had stuck around and circled, and the other two guys sort of kept it away.
This is the moment Henry was dragged into the boat, bleeding profusely.
And at that time, because the shock had completely taken over and it all sorts of feels as though it's happening to someone else, they got me on board the boat and tied a tourniquet up on my stump to stop the bleeding.
Henry's fellow divers worked hard to keep him alive for the 90-minute boat ride back to shore. Arriving to crowds of onlookers, a local doctor quickly injected Henry with plasma, bringing him back from the brink of death. Henry Bourse has now passed on, but not before he spent another 25 years in the ocean he loved. The coastal waters of South Australia are also abundant fishing grounds, with crayfish, abalone, scallops and sharks patrolling the waters. And for fishermen in South Australia, entering the water is always a calculated risk. In the summer of 1963, 23-year-old Rodney Fox was competing in the state spearfishing championships off Aldinga Beach, 50 kilometres south of capital city Adelaide. He had his sights set on a large reef fish, which would definitely win him the big prize for a second time.
I dived down to spear a fish, and I was just about to spear it when this huge, big crunch hit me in the chest, knocked me through the water, the mask off my face, the gun out of my hand, and I knew I was in really big trouble.
He then realised it was a great white shark. A man versus beast struggle ensued.
I tried to gouge around the shark's eyes as hard as I could, and it seemed to let me go. I got up to the surface, a boat came, picked me up, raced me off to hospital, and they stitched me up, and I'm here today.
The fact that Rodney survived is hard to believe.
I'll get in the water somewhere sometime, but I don't know whether I'll go in this gulf here where there's been 2 or 3 attacks in the last few years.
His wetsuit was the only thing that stopped all his innards from spilling out. Several major organs were fully exposed: diaphragm, left lung and clavicle punctured. The great shark's jaws had also crunched through his scapula and ribs. This attack is regarded as one of the most severe ever to have been survived. Rodney's mutilated body was sewn back together with 462 stitches in his chest and 92 in his right hand and arm. Rodney Fox, a miracle survivor of one of the world's worst non-fatal shark attacks. And these days, he's one of the foremost authorities on the great white shark. The northeastern coast of Australia belongs to the state of Queensland. The 4,300 kilometres of coastline includes the famous Gold Coast area, through the rainforests to remote Cape York at Australia's northernmost tip. The warm waters and the abundant marine life attract millions of tourists each year, and some visitors you wouldn't want to meet. Queensland has witnessed 39 shark attacks so far this century, 6 of them fatal. In 2017, personal trainer, amateur boxer, father of 2 and recreational spear fisherman Glenn Dixon was attacked not once, but twice by a bull shark off the coast of far north Queensland. Dawn breaks on February 18. Conditions are perfect. Blue skies, calm water, and plenty of fish. Glenn Dixon had many reasons to keep coming back to this tropical paradise.
The beauty of the reef, being able to go down and not hear any noise and kind of relax, but at the same time, hunt fish.
It was also how Glenn spent time with his good friend Rick Bator, a US Navy master diver with 32 years of experience. Rick was used to seeing sharks every time he went diving.
We have some pretty good fair-sized tigers that are out there that can be upwards of 5 meters.
Glenn and Rick were joined by Peter Kosika and Aaron Butler, also experienced fishermen.
The water was quite nice and there was fish life everywhere, bait everywhere. I was loving it. Big caves, swim throughs.
Within minutes, the shark was spotted. Peter saw it first.
I seen a big side pectoral fin and the body of the shark. I couldn't see the head or the tail because it was sort of in the dark. And I come up and I said to Rick, there's a big shark down there.
3.5 meters, maybe. Big shark.
But Glenn had become separated from the group after diving through a cave. He speared a parrotfish and was floating to the surface behind Eva Rock when the shark attacked.
All of a sudden, I felt a massive pull and shake. It got pulled slightly underwater, and I knew at that point that I was getting attacked by a shark. And as I watched blood rise, that image is imprinted in my head. I'll never forget it, watching the shark come through my blood. So my instincts immediately kicked into survival mode, and I knew that rock was there. So I used everything that I had left to pull myself towards the rock. And he came back and got me again.
As Rick was swimming back to the boat just a few meters away, he heard a muffled scream.
When I turned around, the water was just bright, bright red. And he was trying to claw his way up a rock face. And I could see his body moving in a way that you can't move your body, so the shark was shaking him.
Get in the boat! Man's been hit by a shark!
Immediately, it was just a blur. We were all in the boat, and we zipped around the corner there. I think it would only took 15 seconds, maybe at the most.
I wasn't giving up at all. I didn't think I'm gonna die. I thought I'm gonna get on that rock. That's all I could think.
My worst fears was that he was gone from the waist down both legs. As we pulled him overboard, he sort of looked at us. You can imagine he was really white. He'd lost a lot of blood. He sort of looked at us and half smiled, eh? And we thought it was weird, like...
Biggest smile on his face.
Yeah, it was just a funny sort of thing. You pull someone with their leg nearly ripped off and they're smiling at you, but...
I seen this light and it was very bright, and then it would go away, and I think that's when I got punched in the chest. And it was enough to bring me back. And then Rick in my ear telling me, you got to go back to your family, you're not going to die on me today.
We're in a boat at the moment, we're racing in, we just had a shark attack.
Are you with the patient now?
Yeah, we're with the patient, he's not in a good way.
As Glenn lay dying in the boat,
He's not in a good way, mate, he's not in a good way.
his thoughts were on the ones he loved.
My son, my daughter, my family. In that situation, you can't think deeply. You could only see pictures of their faces. That was enough to keep me driving forward. I never gave up. I could have gone to sleep. I remember having the choice. And I just remember, no, screw that. I'm gonna feel that pain. And Rick said, keep feeling the pain. So I just focused on my breathing. I focused on that pain, and that's all I was gonna do.
Luckily for Glenn, Rick had 3 decades of first aid training while he was in the Navy.
He had a 360-degree cut around his thigh, about right here. It went completely all the way around, and every vein and every artery was severed. And the very first thing I did was put a tourniquet about mid-thigh. The first tourniquet didn't do anything to improve his color. His color was ashy white, had no pulse, had no respirations. And then I saw a little bit of blood, and I put the second tourniquet on. And the moment that happened, he came back 2 shades of color different, and he coughed, and then he screamed.
He's still conscious, mate, he's awake. We've got a guy that used to be in the Navy in America. He's got him in the recovery position. We've got a tourniquet on. I'm sorry if I'm yelling, mate. I'm just...
No, you're right, mate.
Finally, after an agonising 45 minutes, Port Hinchinbrook Marina was in sight. 4 excruciating hours after the attack, Glenn finally arrived at Cairns Base Hospital. In surgery, a team of 11 doctors worked on Glenn for more than 5 hours. There was no question his right leg had to be amputated.
Just accepted it, because I know after being awake and knowing and remembering it all and knowing what trouble I was in, I knew my life was more in trouble than my leg. So if I had to lose my leg for my life, I accepted that pretty quickly.
1, 2, 3.
Wow.
Glenn returned to his family with a firm attitude towards the culling of sharks.
That's cool. I jumped into their territory and I always knew the risks of what I was doing. They were here before us. So why should we have the right to come in and kill all them?
The well-known shark-proof enclosure at Coogee Beach, New South Wales, is a fine example of the combat waged against the shark menace. Day and night, people visiting this pretty beach are glad to accept its strong protection.
Since the early days, governments around Australia have taken a hardline approach to protecting their citizens and visitors. Millions are spent each year on controversial shark control programs. Shark nets are used as a preventative measure right across Australia. Hundreds of sharks are caught every year, but the netting has received criticism, as it also captures dolphins and turtles. And the nets can easily become damaged, leaving swimmers at risk. Another frontline measure is known as drumlining. The drumlines are a series of large baited hooks strung between buoys, floating hundreds of metres offshore. Drumlining has also attracted widespread condemnation from environmentalists.
We have nothing to gain from killing these sharks. We're gaining zero research, zero data, zero benefit for beachgoers, and we're potentially severely impacting the recovery of some of these endangered species, such as the great white shark.
One of the newest innovations in shark attack prevention is drone surveillance. These unmanned aerial cameras can detect sharks in real time and distinguish man-eaters from other marine life. If a shark is spotted, a warning is immediately issued to swimmers below via an automated inbuilt megaphone. Its species detection software is reported to have a 90% accuracy rate. Where these two surfers are completely unaware of the shark just metres from them, the drones are able to warn them of the danger. Byron Bay is the easternmost point of Australia and a haven for holidaymakers. Endless beaches and a rich history make the town of Byron and the surrounding region one of the most desirable destinations in Australia. But beyond the white sands lie the second most dangerous waters on the Australian coastline.
A woman has looked on in horror after her husband was attacked and killed by a shark in Byron Bay.
Reports of fatal shark attacks in the area have become all too familiar.
Bystanders spotted the swimmer in shallow water.
Beachgoers pulled the 50-year-old from the water as onlookers tried desperately to save him.
Families and communities have been shattered. The lure of its ocean and its dangers, a deadly mix.
Police on arrival at the scene immediately had everyone out of the water.
Just off the coast is Julian Rocks, where in 1993, a great white killed honeymooner John Ford in front of his new wife, Debbie.
Mrs. Ford saw what appeared to be a 4 to 5 metre shark and has told police her husband did not surface.
The shark was followed by 3 boats and eventually hooked. Then the hunters realised it was the size of a VW combi van.
It was the biggest shark that's been here for years. It was huge.
According to local fishermen, a white pointer that big hasn't been seen in the area since the whaling days. It was about 6 metres long.
The crew tried to bring in the shark.
When we were fighting the shark out, it spewed up the remains of the body, what it had in it at that stage. But they did recover human remains before we even hooked the shark.
It eventually snapped the line and swam away. The final act in what is now referred to as the Honeymoon shark attack. As recently as 2015, the famous Shelley Beach at Ballina, just south of Byron Bay, was closed. Rescue operators worked around the clock, attempting to find the shark responsible for killing 41-year-old Japanese surfer Tadashi Nakahara. His grief-stricken friends paid tribute at the location of his death, where a shark reportedly bit off both of Nakahara's legs. 2 surfers pulled him out of the water after the attack, but he died from blood loss on the shore. West Australia has the longest coastline of any state or territory in Australia, at 20,781 kilometres. It includes the areas in the north, such as the incredible World Heritage Ningaloo Reef, Shark Bay and Margaret River. The city beaches around Perth, stretching south to the towns of Albany and Esperance. WA has the dubious honour of recently becoming the deadliest place in the world for shark attacks. Since 2000, there have been 14 fatal attacks. That's more than Hawaii, California and Florida combined. It's been calculated that skin divers in some parts of WA have a 1 in 16,000 chance of being attacked. Not great odds. The southern coast of West Australia is a known migratory zone for great white sharks. But nobody in the tiny holiday hamlet of Chains Beach had ever seen one, including 14-year-old Matt Pulella.
Only bronze whalers, like just small ones, 2 metres long, nothing this big.
Matt and his best mate, Jay Muscat, love to fish. They dived here half a dozen times before. Jay had bought a GoPro camera and he was planning to shoot a video to post on YouTube. He ended up shooting his own death. On the day of the dive, Matt was on shore.
We were going to go diving for crays, and I didn't want to go to Chains, and I've called him up and I was just going, oh, maybe we should go somewhere else, and because he'd dove the day before, and he said, oh, there's plenty of fish out there, it's just going to be all right, we'll be fine, and I was like, all right, whatever.
But to Matt, something just didn't feel right.
Like usually you relax before a dive, but I just wasn't relaxed at all. He just looked at me and he's like, oh, I'll be fine, don't worry, we'll be all good.
The 2 boys started out along the rocks.
After shooting at a fish that I missed, I went to load my gun and the bridle lid snapped on it, so I couldn't use it anymore. So Jay's going, oh, don't worry about it, you use my gun.
The boys didn't know it then, but the fateful decision to swap guns would almost certainly save Matt's life.
I grabbed his gun and we were swimming up a bit, and a big school of Samson fish swam through, and they were swimming real fast, and usually they're pretty curious and they stop and look at you and stuff, but they didn't stop. And they just kept swimming, and I was like, all right, this is a bit weird.
Matt spotted a snapper, armed his gun, and Jay, who was swimming in front, set his GoPro camera to record. Then, all hell broke loose.
There was just like a tremendous amount of weight just on my back. Like, I don't know if you've ever been tackled in football or something, your head rings, it was like that. So it's like I'd just been king here from behind, absolutely incredible. And then it's just pushed me under and I popped up like there's all white water. And through the white water you could just see this real thick plume of blood.
A monster great white had attacked the boys from behind. Just as Matt duck dived, it barreled over the top of him and headed straight for Jay.
I thought I'd been hit by a boat or a dolphin. I don't know what had happened. There was a lot of bubbles and stuff. Obviously it was coming through the surface, and then just a lot of blood and just this shark hanging off Jay, and he was kind of kicking, like just keep his head above the water, I guess. And 5 metres of white hanging off him.
Both of the boys came to the surface, Jay desperately struggling to fight off the shark. It had severed his femoral artery. He would have seconds to live.
As I was on the surface, he was on the surface, and we both like yelled at each other, and he's like yelled out, and then he would have gone unconscious pretty quick.
Swimming in a blood-stained ocean, Matt was now all alone and a long, long way from help.
And I looked back and it's coming through the blood, and there's a set of jaws, a massive set of jaws just swimming straight at me. Lots of teeth, wetsuit. I think I can remember 2 rows. In that space of probably 10 seconds, everything that people have ever told you flashes through your head. So I've been told to shoot him in the nostril, that's the best way to stone a shark. So I'm just thinking, I got to shoot this thing in the nose because that's the most sensitive part of a shark, but it didn't give me that option, so I just pointed my gun straight up at its mouth, and by the time I'd raised my gun, it was already halfway up. So I just shot the gun straight down its throat, into its guts.
The shark's jaws were halfway down the gun when Matt pulled the trigger.
Its turn started on and its eyes have rolled back into its head. And they're kind of rolling up and down, and it's just gone to the bottom. And all the line hanging out its mouth, and with me, I'm going down with it. It was dragging me under. And I'm just going, I better let go and stuff, because it's going to go bad. So I let go and just looked up. Jay was floating face down. That's when I kind of made the call to swim to the rocks. Otherwise, if I stayed, I probably would have got chomped as well. I had nothing to protect myself with.
Matt made it to the rocks, but the feeling was bittersweet.
It's great relief, because I knew I was going to be all right, but at the same time I knew Jay wasn't going to be all right.
Matt managed to wave down some fishermen passing in a boat. They picked up Jay's body. Matt's dad knew they were going diving that day, but couldn't have imagined the outcome.
I think he saved his own life by the fact that he stayed alert, watched the shark, and then saw it come at him, and then took the decision to fire at it. So, yeah, I think he was very, very lucky.
Sean Pollard loved to surf, and there wasn't a day that went by without him catching a wave. So, when not working as an electrician, Sean was focused on finding that perfect break. Preferably the hidden gems on quiet beaches that experienced surfers crave. But on those remote surf beaches in Western Australia, sharks come with the territory. That would often worry Sean's girlfriend, Claire.
Each time we go down to go surfing, that's always one of the things that I always mention about, you know, sharks and stuff like that.
Seen a couple of small ones, nothing big. I kind of had a way of dealing with it was I believe that they're not real.
In the summer of 2014, Sean and Claire hit the road and headed for Esperance on the south coast to a beach known as Kelpies. As remote as it is beautiful.
We got down there about 8 and Sean got in the water straight away.
What Sean didn't realise is that 11 days earlier on the same beach, 2 great whites had been spotted by locals, and again a day later. These shots capture a great white terrorising a surfer.
Yeah, I surfed a little right-hander, a couple of little fun ones. The swell was quite small, so it was waiting a long time between sets. I was paddling down the beach and I just felt this massive big bump. And then the shark come underneath me. I could feel my knee. Felt like it had just dislocated. That's when I saw the shark, and I don't know, it's just a big beast.
He can feel the pain, but not see the damage. In fact, that first bite had bitten deep into both legs, from his knees down to his feet. Sean turns to shore, but the shark circles.
It swung back around and had another go at me. I pushed myself up off my board to brace, shield myself, and that worked. I was trying to paddle calmly so I wasn't splashing around like I was panicking, but once it got directly behind me, it charged. That's when it really went in for the kill.
In a flash, the beast, as Sean described it, charges for a third ferocious time.
I spun around to try and face it. That's when it come up out of the water. I didn't even see its teeth. It took me across, and I was its eye was right there in front of me. It started shaking. Its head, both my arms in its mouth. Took me underwater. I remember having to hold my breath and just shook its head 7 or 8 times. Hardest thing I've ever felt. It was so strong.
The shark won't release Sean, but traumatically, he is freed when the shark takes his left arm and right hand.
Next thing, I popped up. There was blood everywhere. It ripped my forearm off, and like sucked the meat off my bone like a chicken bone, pretty much. I could see the elbow socket, and I just tried to move my arm, and so that's not normal. I thought I had to get to the beach.
Sean looks around for his surfboard, which he's been using as a shield, but it's floating out to sea. And then he's suddenly aware of a new threat. There's not one, but two sharks.
I could see the shark was between me and my board. My board was further out to sea. And that's when I got bumped from behind by another shark. It was a short moment, man. I was just looking up at the sky and I was waiting for it to attack me again.
But it's right then that the ocean throws Sean a lifeline.
A wave popped up and I could see the shark through the wave, but it broke before it got to me, and I managed to like body surf it a bit on my back and I got away. And I kept kicking and another wave came and washed me a bit further in.
It was the wave that saved his life.
If that wave hadn't come at that time, it probably would have come back.
Sean's girlfriend Claire, meanwhile, was unaware of what had happened, but she could see something was wrong.
I'd looked up and could see his board really far out, like heaps further than what it normally is, but I couldn't see him. That was a bit strange. And then I did see him coming in on a wave, like body surfing, and he was sort of like looking over at me. And then as he stood up that first time, that's when I realised, because he was like lopsided.
As luck would have it, a group of beachgoers had just arrived. Amazingly, all of them had first aid experience. As Sean's rescuers rushed to his aid, a call was placed to emergency.
Police emergency, how may I help you?
We've got a shark attack at Wiley Bay Beach in Esperance, past Wiley's Head. Kelphead Beach it's called.
In Esperance?
In Esperance, yeah.
All right then, no worries. I'll get a job on.
Yeah, guys lost both his arms, got bitten by a shark.
Okay, so Wiley Beach, the locals will know where that is.
Call it Kelpies or Kelphead, the police or the ambulance, they know where it is.
Sean was dragged from the shallows and treated on the beach until the ambulance arrived. All the time, Sean was conscious, in shock, and incredibly, not without humour.
I remember saying to Claire, Mum's going to be pissed.
In the end, Mum wasn't that pissed, as Sean made it to hospital thanks to the amazing resourcefulness of the people on the beach that day. He survived intense surgery and rehab to come out the other side.
It was only because of my family and friends. Otherwise, if I didn't have them, I don't think I would have come out of the water that day.
The way people use the ocean has changed over time, and that has coincided with the rise in Australian shark attacks. But why do sharks attack people? Remember, we're talking about a wild, unpredictable animal. Hard data on behaviour and habits remain elusive. Despite countless studies and research projects, the science can never be exact.
We all love the water. That's something all Australians love, but we've got a lot of sharks. So your encounters is going to be really high.
The risk of a fatality from shark attack in Australia remains low, with an average of 1.7 fatalities per year over the past 26 years.
If you want to minimise your risk of being bitten, you really do need to be shark aware. Don't swim and surf at dusk or dawn. Don't swim and surf when it's turbid water, for example. And in that way, you can minimise your risk.
So the chances of actually getting attacked by a shark, they say it's like, it's easier to win the lottery.
Let's face it, you're never going to win the lottery, so maybe it's best just to relax and enjoy.